I can't believe I've reached a third season. Effluvium has evolved since September of 2022. At the time, I had approached it as a more informal sort of live stream with a large panel, less structure, and with an exciting sort of chaos. But I think that over time, I realized that it was a good idea to evolve. And we had a great season for 2023, 2024. Some fascinating guests. And here we are in the third chapter in this evolution of what is turning into more of a podcast. Except this podcast is fun because you get to experience it live, you get to see us, you get to interact. There are some new things. Going forward, Effluvium is one-on-one with me and a guest, or one-on-two or three if that guest comes together as a package. But don't be afraid. Don't fret. Rachel's going to be returning. Rachel's actually going to be doing a quarterly review with me, and she and I will be on those live streams one-on-one starting in October. So every 3 months, she and I are going to team up, and we're going to be doing those quarterly live streams. We have yet to give it a title, but that should be a lot of fun, and that works with her schedule a lot better. So don't worry, Rachel isn't gone. Rachel will be back for quarterly live streams starting in October. So to kick off this first episode of the 2024-2025 season, I wanted to do a recital from one of my favorite reviewers who has shared reviews on Fragrantica. And he went by the name of Dedidol. I don't know if anybody is familiar with his reviews. He slowed down on the reviewing maybe at around 2018 or so, if my memory serves me. And I just had to read one of my favorite reviews of his because I just crack up. His sense of humor is rapier, I guess you could say. He's quite caustic at times, shoots from the hip. Sort of like some other people that we know who are well-known reviewers. And yeah, so I'd like to read a review from Dedidol that was posted June 7th of 2015. This was his review of Un Coeur de Mai from MDC Parfums. And it starts as follows. Un Coeur de Mai. Yes, he writes MEH instead of MAI. Un Coeur de Mai is a prim and proper green floral with an old-fashioned feel that's nicely put together and intensely realistic. It has a sort of idyllic English country garden thing going on. It's the kind of perfume that would fit in well at some high society social luncheon where everybody keeps on saying shit like, "Oh, Lady Genevieve von Tittington, you are just terrible," over and over. Overall, it's a pretty spring-like, crisp thing, but maybe a tad too characterless in the end. Decently spun and definitely fits in well with the line's aesthetic simulations of utterly ancient perfume. And I imagine that this is what the lady in Jean-Honoré Fragonard's The Swing from 1766 is wearing while flashing her bloomers at the creeper in the bushes. So that's a great review from Dedidol. Try to look him up on Fragrantica. Unfortunately, he seemed to have lost interest in review writing a number of years ago, but he has some ruthless and hilarious reviews of some perfumes, including some that beware you may be quite fond of. So stay tuned, because in 2 weeks, Fliss of Fliss Sniff Stuff and Les Odorants, we're going to be talking about the reviewing process and what does it mean to review a fragrance. We're going to dive into that topic. But for this episode, we have a very talented gentleman and a friend of mine, Darren Alan of Darren Alan Perfumes. He is going to be discussing with me perfume safety. Now, we as consumers, we may not often think about what happens behind the scenes, but it would behoove us to do that because we want to be careful that what we're purchasing has been created in a setting and an environment that follows safety standards, that follows the regulations. I know some perfumers like to throw out the IFRA handbook, and they'd like to, just not be restrained, not be, to be unfettered by regulations. But there's something to be said for regulatory bodies, and they're not the boogeymen who we, that we might think them to be. So we're going to be talking about that as well. And just to be a more shrewd consumer overall. So we're going to start that conversation in a moment. I'm going to take a look at the chat here and see what we have coming in here. We have Nathaniel Moody. Lovely to see you. We have Philippe Alex. Great to see you as well. And his scent of the day is Rochas Femme. We have 11 people who are tuned in. We're going to give it probably a couple of more minutes to get some more people coming into the live stream chat or onto the live stream itself. So far, 3 people, or 2 people rather, have spoken up to let us know that they are present. We have a third one here. We have Pat Lester. Great to see you as well. Hello, JJ, scent of the day. Dorian's Fougere, definitely one of my fave discoveries of the year. That was one of my fave discoveries of last year. Well, I don't know if it was a discovery. Darren made me aware of it, but I discovered for myself just how enamored I was with Dorian's Fougere. An excellent composition. Nathaniel mentions Scent of the Day, Bohemian Lime. And we have Pafangia saying, hi, wonderful to make your acquaintance. I'm glad that we could be connected, and I'm glad that you're here to tune in. We have 14 people tuned in. So far, we have 5 people rather, who have spoken up. Don't be shy. Let us know you're here. Just say hi. Just say hello. Let us know that you're present. Let us know that you're tuned in. We have 16 people who are tuned in. I think this is about time that we get started with the conversation. Thank you very much, Gia. And we'll bring in Darren right now, and we'll kick things off here. And Darren, it's wonderful to see you again.
Hello, JJ.
Hi. So we've decided to talk about how do we say this in as not an impolitic way, but there have been some concerns, that there are some perfumers who are not working. Who are, there are perfumers like yourself who are self-taught, independent perfumers, artisan perfumers. And there may be some concerns that we may have some people out there in the marketplace who may be not following some of the rules and some of the standard practices of perfume making and perfume safety. So why don't we get started with that? What is the first thing that comes to mind to you that is maybe your biggest concern when we're dealing with an independent perfumer, not working in a controlled setting?
Oh, just one? Just one concern?
You could, okay, name your biggest concerns. We won't limit it to one.
Well, I guess the most basic concern would be the quality of the materials. Because if you're not starting with safe and appropriate materials, then none of the other, compliances that you try to put into place will really matter. So, we're really fortunate as a small indie perfumer or people who are studying perfumery or novice perfumers, hobbyist perfumers, that we have online resources where we can purchase top quality materials, the same, professional materials that is being used across the industry, that is an industry standard. And they've all been manufactured by large corporations that have SOPs and they're GMP compliant, and they do all the appropriate testing. So it's not difficult to get good materials. It's expensive to get good materials sometimes, but there are always going to be those people that are trying to take shortcuts,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and using sub-quality materials or using fragrance oils that are not intended for perfumery, because there's, you know, when people think of fragrance oils or perfume oils, they sort of clump them all into the same category. You know, oh, well, it's a perfume oil, so you can use it in perfume. But there are different qualities, actually, of these materials. Some of them are intended for use on the skin,
Right.
perfumes or other personal care products like lotions, bath gels, body butters, things like that, shampoo. And then there are other quality materials that are meant for use in room fragrances like candles or reed diffusers that are really not meant to be put on the skin. And those are usually a lower price point. So that could be attractive to some people that may not know the difference or may not really have consumer safety in the forefront of their mind when they are purchasing their materials. So I would have to say the quality of the materials is sort of like the baseline. And then from there, you know, you can put other industry practices into place to make sure that you're putting out a product that is safe and compliant.
So for folks at home, SOP, as far as I am aware, standard of practice, right?
Yeah.
And GMP, general manufacturing practice. So the least that we could expect from somebody who is starting a small business, which is essentially if you're going to be a perfume maker with the intention of commercial sale, at minimum, you should be following standard of practice and general manufacturing practice. So we do have concerns that there are some out there who may not necessarily follow these practices. And you're mentioning that one of the examples of this is using materials that are not designed for use on skin, right? Like these things are not formulated to be, certainly not formulated to be put in at whatever percentage that, you know, the person feels fit. That some of these perfume oils are designed for things like candles. So they might have their chemical composition might involve things that allow for combustibility because you're dealing with something that is ignited and they want that scent to diffuse under those conditions of heat and combustibility. And those things are not necessarily going to be appropriate on human skin. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. And, you know, those materials may be good materials for a candle or or a reed diffuser, but they weren't intended for use on skin. They weren't tested for use on skin. So, you know, you have to really be cautious of what you're using and that you're using the highest quality materials at the appropriate levels and that what you're using is cosmetic grade.
Cosmetic grade, that's important because cosmetic grade means it has been tested and formulated specifically for application on the skin. So what would we expect from an independent perfume brand to present to show evidence that they are following these good practices, these, you know, the SOP, standard of practice, general manufacturing practice? Should we have an expectation from an independent perfumer to present that they are following these things?
Well, I think we should. But, you know, as a consumer, when you go into a store, when you go into Sephora or, you know, a department store, and you are picking a perfume or any cosmetic up off the shelf, and you're considering purchasing it, you are under the assumption that it has gone through all of the appropriate steps it's been tested, it is safe. And when you're especially buying perfumes online, and from small, perfume houses, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of independent perfumers out there who take safety very seriously. But the difficulty becomes, how do you know which ones do and how do you know which ones don't? It just has to go, you have to trust your gut, partially. But also you can look at things like what information is provided by the perfumer or the brand on their website. Do they have complete ingredient lists for every product? And do those ingredient lists, see, there's a big change going on right now in the United States with the regulation of cosmetics. We're becoming more in line with the EU.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of like allergen listing and things like that, and accountability, which I think is a good thing. If people are purchasing a cosmetic, they should feel confident that it's safe. So if you see an ingredient list that just says, alcohol, water, fragrance, you might want to think twice. That for years, for decades, has been the only requirement by the FDA,
right,
who also oversees cosmetics, and perfume is considered a cosmetic. So it has always been under the auspices of the FDA. They didn't really enforce it very much. But there's new legislation out, the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulations Act of 2022, that puts us more in step with the EU in terms of safety regulations, listing allergens on your ingredient lists, just to give consumers more information about what they're buying. And if someone does have a known allergy to geraniol or eugenol or something,
right,
then they can see that on the list, and then it's up to them whether or not they want to purchase that product.
right. And often the misconception for those who look at the ingredients list is that is the extent of the ingredients or that are put into that perfume, which is not true. Those are the components or ingredients that are required to be listed because of their potential for allergic reaction. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to think of another way. Potential allergies. Sensitivity, yeah, or photosensitivity, anything like that. So, and those are required to be listed through the regulations of IFRA, based on those EU regulations. Am I correct in saying that? So,
well, they're required to be listed by the EU Cosmetic Regulatory Authority.
Okay.
They use IFRA as a sort of standard to see which ingredients are more problematic. But yeah, it's up to each country, or in the case of the EU, to decide what what ingredients are going to be on their allergen list.
Okay.
So the United States, as they have not yet released the MOCRA, which is the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act, is in effect now. It's in effect, but the FDA is notoriously slow for rolling things out, and they have not yet released the allergen list. So, and I'm not an authority on this. This is just from my own research, and I took a class on regulatory. So I'm just going by the latest information that I have. As far as I know, unless something has changed within the last week or so, the proposed allergen list is supposed to be published in October.
Okay.
And again, these are just allergens that need to be listed on the ingredient list. These are not ingredients that are going to be banned.
Okay.
So that's two different things. People sometimes jump the gun and think, "Oh, I'm never going to be able to use linalool again." But
yeah. No, there is that panic that happens. So for folks who are tuned in who are not familiar with IFRA, IFRA is the International Fragrance Association. It's a global representative body of the fragrance industry. And according to their mission statement, it seeks to represent the collective interests of the industry and promote the safe use of fragrances through regulation. Now, my question for you for Mocher, which you just mentioned, which I'm a lot less familiar with, this is a newer development. Are we going to see that there's some redundancy with that, some of the same overlap, or are we going to see more restrictions perhaps, or more requirements with Mocher being rolled out?
Yeah, I would be surprised if our restrictions and our regulations were stricter than the EU. I think it's going to put us on similar footing with the EU. I mean, the FDA has been pretty liberal about cosmetics and perfumery materials. I mean, this MOCRA legislation is the first like major update to cosmetic regulations in like over 80 years. You know, so I think they're just going to sort of take a page out of the out of the EU playbook, and I would be surprised if it was more restrictive.
Right.
And they are opening this up, so they're publishing their proposed list in October. It's the latest I heard, unless it gets pushed back again. It was supposed to be published in June, and then there's going to be a period of public comment where people can write letters, send emails. So if anyone feels strongly about a certain material not being on that list, then that's your opportunity to make your voice heard. And that will probably go maybe at least 30 days, maybe 60 days, 90 at the most. And then they'll take the public comment into account. And then they have 180 days after that to publish their finalized list.
Right.
So this probably is not going to happen until next year, as far as the ingredient list goes.
Yes.
And then even after that, the FDA is really good. I mean, they're not trying to bust anybody and put small businesses out of business. You know, they just want to make sure that everyone is being safe and compliant and that consumers are protected. And I've dealt with the FDA for a long time. I don't know, people may not know, but before I launched my Darren Alan Perfumes brand, I, in 2005, started a skincare company. We made all natural and organic skincare and personal care products. So I've been dealing with the FDA for a while. I was one of the people that, like the nerd that I am, signed up for their voluntary cosmetic registration program. So I've already gone through a lot of this, like uploading my formulas to the FDA and getting, they're not FDA approved. They're just, you know, you register your facility with them and you upload your formulas, and they have the option of coming back to you and saying, you know, this is too high, or that's, you know, we can't approve this formula for that reason. And they're really good about giving guidance to the industry and making suggestions about how you can fix it, and then you just reapply it and it's fine. So like the last big thing they had a few years ago was they changed the drug monograph on sunscreen on how it was supposed to be labeled. And they gave the industry at least 2, I want to say 4 years to get up to speed, you know, and change their labeling and get compliant. So, you know, if you are a small, you know, perfumer, this isn't something you should be afraid of. You're going to have plenty of time to get compliant and get all of your ducks in a row. So I think it's a good thing.
So there's a lot of conversation amongst fragrance enthusiasts, and I know IFRA at this point is beating a dead horse, but can we just clear the air one more time for those who have expressed their grief at IFRA being the villain in this situation? Can you just clarify the truth about their role as a regulatory body?
Yeah, and I used to be, in the beginning, I used to be one of those people.
Me too, actually.
And the more I researched it and talked to people that are inside the industry, so IFRA, if they're not the boogeyman, they're not trying to to desecrate anyone's perfume palette. They're not a regulatory body. They are not making laws. They are making scientific suggestions based on studies, working with dermatologists and toxicologists and people within the industry to find the greatest level of percentage that you can safely use an ingredient in a perfume. So, they're not trying to ban everything.
Yeah.
They're trying to keep these materials in perfumers' hands, because if it were just up to the government, they would say, oh, well, this gives someone a rash, so we'll just ban it. And they would be banning things right and left without regard to how that would impact not only the industry, but the perfume industry, but also the manufacturers and the farmers and, the distillers. It's a chain of people that would suffer if things were just banned constantly. So I remember a couple years ago, I can't remember where I read it. It was in a trade journal. I don't remember if it was Perfumer and Flavorist or Personal Care magazine, but it was one of those trade journals, that the EU was proposing to outright ban lavender essential oil.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this was a serious thing they were talking about,
Right.
And
it's so indispensable for not only perfume, but a lot of functional products as well. It has such widespread application, aromatherapists, everything. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Cleaning products,
Right.
Everything. So these politicians were saying they were going to ban lavender. And it was IFRA who came to them with the scientific information. And I don't know exactly how it all went down, but it sort of blew over and went away, and it's not banned. So, I'm thankful that they are there to advocate for perfumers, because
Right.
we have such small voices in this industry, and we can only use what is available to us. So, if I have to use a little bit less oak moss, I would rather do that than not use it at all.
Right, because if the EU had its way, then oak moss could have been banned entirely, or even something like bergamot. Yeah. So they're advocates. They're not enemies.
Yeah. They're trying to keep
narrative has persisted for so long that IFRA has destroyed perfume, but it seems like they're actually there to prevent the destruction and the ruin of perfume as an industry and as an art.
I believe so. And it's not IFRA that is banning ingredients, on a national level. They can't enact any type of law or require you to do anything. They're giving standards of practice and, industry best practice based on scientific information. And it's up to each individual country and the perfumer, if you're going to follow their recommendation or not.
Right. We currently have 32 people tuned in, and if you haven't hit the like button, please remember to do so. And this is just a reminder that if you want to support this content, you can buy me a coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Joseph Kolb P. As always, or at least until further notice, 6 cups will get you a sample pack. And 12 cups will get you a 4-bottle grab bag plus a sample pack, US only, please. So I want to get back now to some of the things that we should see as red flags for an independent perfumer, maybe if they happen to have a huge social media presence, and they may seem to have a transparency about how they go about their work. What are the expectations that we should have about their work environment? What are some things that we should see if they are sharing with us their work environment? And what are some of the things that should make us cautious as far as what they choose to do and how they choose to handle compounding in the work environment?
Yeah. So, some perfumers do choose to show their workspace. Some do not. I personally do it sometimes, but my workspace is sort of small and there's just like stuff everywhere. So there's really not a good shot or a good place to set up a camera. But, their materials should be stored properly. Mm-hmm. They should be labeled properly. The workroom or lab or studio, whatever you choose to call it, should be a dedicated space, hopefully, to that. There should be no food or drink in the manufacturing area. That's one of the, requirements for GMP compliance. If you're, I do sometimes do lives where I'm mixing an accord or smelling materials. And like right now I'm in my dining room just because there's more room and the lighting is better.
And you have the beautiful plants as well.
Oh yeah.
And the ambient sound of your I hear your little bird there too.
Can you hear them?
Yeah, it's not distracting at all. It adds to the ambience. Yeah.
I have 2 finches.
Oh,
and
finches, yeah.
Yeah, they're always really quiet until like I'm on the phone or, when I don't want them to be chirping, and then they're chirping.
Rachel's here. Hi, Rachel. Looking forward to having you join me next month. Thank you for being here and helping keep things under control with the wrench as one of our moderators. It's great to see you.
So, so some other things you would want to look for. You might want to think twice about buying a perfume from a perfumer if they're, on a live or something, and they're sitting there and they're making perfume with no gloves, with a bag of chips next to their beaker. Just common sense type things.
Right. Well, you would think that would be common sense, but I think that, I don't know if it has to do with our age. Not our age as how old we are, but our age as in where we are as a society. But maybe we tend to be forgiving and we tend to overlook some of these things because we want to trust that whatever somebody is doing has, that is doing the right thing if they're so transparent about what they're doing, that I think that we may tend to forget to question what we see with our own eyes. But if we do, what can we really do? What can we really do about it? Maybe what we could do as consumers is avoid being a customer for them, because we can be concerned, like say, for example, if you're talking about there being food and being and there are no gloves, that's a sanitation issue, right? Like hygienic sanitation. If you think about more controlled environments, that would violate a health code.
Right.
But if you have somebody working from home, if you have somebody working from a home base and they're the CEO of their business, they're the owner of their business, then that should be cause of concern, because if you are not doing those things, what could be the end result in the product that ends up in your hands?
Exactly.
And go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're hitting the nail right on the head. And the thing too, to maybe have a thought on is if a perfumer is on camera making a perfume, sitting on the floor with no shoes on and no gloves, with a bag of open chips next to their beaker, what are they doing when they're not on camera?
Yeah, if they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? If they're so flagrant about it.
Like if that's putting their best foot forward.
Then what is it when they're having an off day and they choose not to put on the camera? That's
Yeah.
basically what we're saying. We have a few comments here that we want to highlight. We have Aroma Inquiry Lab, eye wash station. I don't think that's a bad idea, right? Emily asks, can you please say more about what you mean by stored properly, proper storage?
Absolutely, yeah. So there is actually guidance by the FDA on how cosmetic materials should be stored. And again, you know, I consider myself an artist. I think a lot of perfumers do consider themselves an artist. And, you know, when we think of perfume making, sometimes we think of it as more of an art. And so, you know, the safety kind of things may not be in the forefront of our mind, but perfume making is it's a cosmetic. You know, I mean, people are spraying this on their skin. And so there should be this basic requirement that at least it is clean and it is safe. Yeah, as far as storing materials go, they cannot be stored on the floor, even if they're in boxes.
Right. Yeah. I would guess that would be, you know, stating the obvious, but that's shocking that some perfumers would choose to do that.
Right. They need to be stored in either a cabinet or a closet or on shelving. And, you know, there are certain requirements for the room also. It has to have hard surfaces. It's not supposed to be carpeted in case of a spill. And there is supposed to be an eye wash station, so that is right on point. And you can buy portable eye wash stations. I mean, I don't have, you know, like a walk-in chemical shower.
Right. It doesn't need to be like what they would have in a large-scale science lab, you know.
Right. Yeah. Get ones that you hang on your wall and you take the bottle off and twist it off, and, you know, I've luckily never needed to use it, but it's there. So they're just, you know, every other industry is regulated as in terms of safety and manufacturing. The food industry, you know, I mean, paint is regulated as far as manufacturing goes. So I just don't understand why people would not want their cosmetics to be manufactured safely. I mean, if you think back to, you know, the turn of the century in the early 1900s, there were no cosmetic regulations. You know, cosmetics were being made, compounded by pharmacists or druggists, and they were making, you know, toothpaste with radium in it to give you a brilliant white smile, and, you know, fade creams to get rid of freckles with mercury. And so, you know,
cadmium.
Exactly. So I think a little bit of regulation and safety is a good thing,
Right.
With something that you're putting all over your body. But if, you know, if someone is concerned about a certain perfumer or a certain brand, reach out to them, you know, and ask them and say, you know, are you GMP compliant? I mean, legally, you can ask for a copy of the SDS, the safety data sheet for a perfume. As a consumer, if you request an SDS from a manufacturer, we legally have to supply it.
And if a perfumer cannot provide a safety data sheet, that is your sign that you need to run in the other direction, because they're not being careful with what they're doing.
Yeah, it's pause for thought. Like when I make a perfume, you know, the first thing I do, well, I have software that helps me know pretty well that it's going to be IFRA compliant and that everything is under the correct levels. But it's difficult, especially when you're working with naturals.
Right.
Because, you know, they're so complex. And you can have multiple, you know, multiple materials that may contribute to pushing you over the limit on like eugenol or like damascones or something like that. So you really have to have your fragrances tested. So, you know, once I'm pretty sure that my formula is safe and compliant, I will send a sample out to a third-party lab. They'll do, you know, GC testing on it. And then when I get the results back, I can see, okay, yep, everything is as it should be, or, oh, you know what, this is a little high. I need to reformulate this and have it tested again. And you can't produce an SDS unless you know what the levels are of the allergens, because that's one of the categories on the SDS. So yeah, if someone can't supply you with that information, then that would be pause for concern. It's like, if they're not even concerned about the safety of their own product and whether it is safe or not, that's, to me, that would be a major red flag.
Coughing and hacking all over the place whilst blending. So would this potentially be a concern of proper ventilation, as Aroma Inquiry Lab mentions here? Because I know that when I was sort of an amateur, and I was an amateur for a while, I was an amateur for a few years, and I knew I was still an amateur. That's another story for another time. I ended up having issues with sensitivity and coughing because I wasn't properly ventilating while, you know, tooling around with what I was doing. And I then took it very seriously. So I suppose, as Emily was saying, if you do see that somebody's doing something, I don't know, on social media, working on their compounding, blending, whatever you would like to refer to, and they're coughing and hacking all over the place. But then also, you got to keep in mind that it's not only the poor ventilation. I mean, we can be concerned about their health, but the coughing and the hacking, that would be there would be, what are the vape, or what do you call the, you know, like you could be contaminating with particulate matter as well, which can be an issue. You know, if you must do the working while you're coughing and hacking, maybe wearing a mask isn't out of the question, right?
Yeah, we all have them.
Right.
I have boxes of them still sitting around.
Yeah. A very bright lighting. Yeah, that seems like a good idea, because you have to really see what you're doing.
No pets in the air.
Oh, yes. Well, that would seem obvious as well. You know, you don't want to have pets around because it's also a danger to them.
Yeah, you would think it would be obvious.
Well, that's embarrassing. If people have actually seen that, that's really mortifying. Aroma Inquiry Lab can't just dump stuff down the sink or burn. Find a disposal service or find out location and the requirements. Ooh, yeah. Like I know I learned that I was doing the wrong thing very early on by dumping things down the toilet. I was really stupid because I was ignorant. And then I realized I can't do this. I'm contaminating water supply. And that was when I was doing naturals. Naturals are not exempt from potential contamination. And you're also, you know, you're dealing with, you know, with whatever solvents are being used that can contaminate and cause some issues as well. So, yeah, I mean, are we seeing people on social media doing that when they're deciding that something's a dud, and then they're actually, because that's not a good sign at all.
No. I mean, if you contact your local authority, you know, your like where I live, there is a place where you can take, you know, like hazardous materials and drop it off, and they'll dispose of it for you. So I have what I call my Frankenfume jar.
Sort of like that Mi Fleur, where everything is just all the tragedies, or
all the tragedies get dumped in there. And then I take it and drop it off, and they take care of it. They take paint and things like that too. So every locality has a service like that. And a lot of these materials, if you look at the SDS and you see the little pictogram with the little dead fish lying on its side, that means don't flush it down the toilet.
Yeah. That's pretty bad news. I mean, and it's not even hard to access these resources either. Yeah. Tripler says incinerator for lackluster formulas. That's one way of putting it. But there is no, I don't think that the incinerating would be safe, but you leave it in their hands and they dispose of it properly, which is good, which is what we should see people doing.
Right.
We have Angstrom. We have him saying hi. Thank you, my friend. Glad to see you here. And then Aroma Inquiry Lab. Darren, do you have any advice about disposal? So I guess we kind of went over that a little bit already. Do you have any other comments on disposal, what to do and what not to do?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what the material is, obviously. But like my Frankenfume jar, I will even get like a, like an 8-ounce spray bottle, and I'll just make like an air freshener for the powder room. Like you can use it for other things, or you can use it to scent wrapping paper. There's a lot of things. If it smells good and you don't want to, get rid of it, it does depend on the material, and you do need to contact your local authority because there are some things they won't take. And if they don't, then depending on the volume that you're working at too, you could sign up for a service where you go and drop it off and they take care of it for you. It's a paid service, so it just depends. And every, municipality is different as far as their laws go for that type of thing.
Great to see you, Daneem. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm glad you appreciate these discussions. And Aroma Inquiry Lab says great advice, Darren. And Rachel has a question here. Do you recommend storing any materials or even fragrances in a fridge? And from my knowledge, from having the materials that I do, because you know that I'm discussing a lot of materials in some of my other streams, some of them I do have to store in a fridge. They recommend refrigeration, right?
Right.
Can you name some examples for the audience of what is generally refrigerated?
Yeah. So things that are like citrus essential oils are a good idea to refrigerate those. It's not that they're harmful if you don't, it's just they'll degrade quicker. Things like aldehydes, terpenes, and I also refrigerate my floral absolutes, just not that they have to be refrigerated, but when you're dropping a couple $1,000, you want
to guarantee that they keep themselves intact as long as you can, especially if you don't want to go through them very fast and revisit them when working. Yeah.
Right. And another thing that you can do too, that's a little trick, is you can get cans of the pressurized argon gas, like places that just are like wine making places sell them. There are some cosmetic supply places that sell them too. And after you open it up and use the material, there's a little nozzle, you put it in there and you spray some argon in there, and it's heavier than oxygen. So it displaces the oxygen in the headspace of the bottle. So it helps it to last longer.
It slows that oxidation process.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Scott, thank you very much. Really do appreciate it. I'm glad that you have us as a companion while you're hiking. And we have Paradigm Sniff. Hello to both of us. He apologizes for tuning in late. 5 p.m. Mountain Time. Yep, it's Eastern Standard Time. I set the times for that. Okay, so it's actually would be 4 p.m. that we started in Mountain Time. No worries. I understand you're in Mountain Time. Next time, I will clarify that for you. Rachel says you can use argon for wine bottles as well. And Bilbo says, Darren, if you ever need anyone to shill your frags, I'm your hobbit. I'll start practicing my 10 out of 10 sales pitch. Rascal. We're not having that conversation here. That's more than covered elsewhere. We have plenty of people who have that covered already. It's not going to concern me here. All right. And I just wanted to highlight another question here from Aroma Inquiry Lab. Darren, can you recommend accessible, low-cost software for IFRA compliance?
I can tell you what I'm using. So, there is like industry software that updates constantly and has all of the IFRA limitations for materials pre-programmed in, and every time a new amendment comes out, it updates. And basically, you just put in your formula, and it can generate SDS reports and IFRA compliance certificates and things like that automatically. Those are really expensive. So unless you are a big company that's doing millions of dollars in sales a year, then that would be worth it. But otherwise, it depends on your budget. The one I'm using is called Formulaire, and it was developed by a fellow indie perfumer, Sam Macer. And it has some really nice features, and it's like $50.
Nice.
And it's like a one-time purchase thing. You don't have to pay annually.
Subscription.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you have to enter in all your materials in your material library, and you enter in, the CAS number, the inky name, the botanical name, any information you want to put in, and also the IFRA limit. So there is that input of you having to put it in there. I don't mind doing it whenever I get a new material. When I do my smell evaluation on it, then I just enter it into the software. But it's really nice software. It is only available for Mac iOS. So if you have a PC or a Galaxy, an Android phone, there's an app also. I think at some point they are coming out with a PC Android version, but it's nice because you can put your formula in, and if anything is exceeding the IFRA limits, then it lights up in red, and then you can go and you can adjust things to get it to make sure that it's compliant. So it's really easy to use. Before that, I was using a spreadsheet that I made myself, and I'm so horrible with Excel. And I'm not.
That's what I'd have going for me, because I have to use Excel all the time in my full-time job. So
I don't know how people do it. I just, my brain can't think like that. All those little boxes, I just can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like an Apple app. It's very clean and streamlined, which I like. So it's very minimalistic, but it has everything I need. So that's what I use, and that's what I would recommend. And I have no affiliation with it. I'm not getting any kind of kickback or anything. It's just what I found to work for me.
You don't have a paid partnership.
Sadly, no.
Glenn Wheeler has a question here. Hi, Fragrance Vault here. We are wondering if raw materials should be stored in a separate refrigerator from the kitchen refrigerator due to contamination issues like mold.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, even though, I would never put raw materials in with food. Because you could have contamination issues like mold, fungus, bacteria. And then on the flip side, I really wouldn't want to, slice a nice piece of Gruyere cheese to have it smell like methylenone. Right. Because even though you have your bottles tightly capped, there is some off-gassing with material.
A lot of off-gassing, yeah. So there's some really tenacious, high-impact materials that will off-gas, and they will make everything smell and taste like it. So, yeah, for that alone, I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, definitely. So another thing that I wanted to bring up is, say we purchase a sample or a bottle from an independent perfumer, or from anywhere for that matter, and we might get a reaction. What kind of reaction would we consider to be not that there's any normal reaction, but a reaction where there's little cause of alarm? And what would be a reaction that would be a concern? Say if we get some sort of a dermal reaction.
Right. So especially if you're using naturals, and I love naturals. I'm not knocking naturals. I started as a natural perfumer, as all natural. And over time, I expanded my palette. So I am mixed media, but I have such a love and affection for naturals. And my perfumes are very high in natural materials. So I'm not knocking natural perfumery. I have very close friends that are excellent natural perfumers. But natural materials can cause allergic reactions in people. You know, just as if you ate something and had an allergic reaction to it. So it happens. And it can also happen that over time you can develop an allergy to something if you are constantly exposed to it. So
overexposure, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, the person that is spraying that full fat oak moss on their wrist and saying, oh, well, I'm not allergic, it's fine, it doesn't bother me. It could over time.
Yeah.
So, you know, it depends on the type of the reaction. You know, people can be sensitive to something and have it not be an allergy. And, you know, as a perfumer, you could put out a fragrance that is completely compliant and someone could still have a sensitivity to a material. So it depends on the extent of it. You know, if it's just like your wrist gets a little bit itchy or it gets a little pink, you know, you may just want to lay off that for a while, let that heal, and maybe try it on a different spot of your body, because even different spots of our body have different temperatures.
Right.
But, you know, if you spray something on and, you know, you get a chemical burn or a blister, then that is, in my experience, that is a problem with the product.
That, from my knowledge, because, you know, some folks tuned in and, you know, that I've had experience working with materials and have been naive and have decided to use too high a percentage. I think I've told the story of using too much Masoya bark oil, which is now banned, I believe. But at the time it was heavily restricted, and my entire neck was beet red as a result, testing it on myself. I mean, I was so new to it all. I was, you know, I was kind of boneheaded. You know, I've had instances where benzoin will cause me to break out in a little rash only on my wrists, not on any other part of my skin. So these things can and will happen. And if you're not responsible with these raw materials, natural or synthetic, these things can happen. But the end product, your main goal is to make sure that you're limiting that issue with the consumer. And it's one thing for the consumer to realize, well, I did a patch test on my wrist, and whatever's in here is causing some bumps and some redness and itchiness. But it's another thing to have something that seems to have caused more of a caustic reaction to the dermal surface, because that's a sign that something's in it that probably was never meant to be in a cosmetic product, because it's causing, either we're talking about something that has been dosed way too high, but I feel like that would be even less likely. I can't even think of too many materials used in perfume that if you overdosed it, they would cause a blister. So it almost sounds like whatever happened would be somebody had decided to put something in that wasn't meant for a perfume. And it could be, as we were talking about earlier in the live stream, it could be those things like the candle fragrance oils or other types of fragrance oils that were never intended for cosmetic use. Right. So that's really concerning. And what if somebody were to experience that? What are the steps that they should take? Are there channels that they could take to report that? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually FDA regulations for that. It's called adverse events reporting. So if, you know, and there's two levels of it. So there's an adverse event, which would be just like a rash, or, you know, itching, a rash, you know, something minor. And then there is a serious adverse event, which is considered something that would require professional medical intervention, like a trip to the ER or to a doctor or to an urgent care, something that causes a change in the anatomy of the human body. So like a blister, or a chemical burn would be altering the skin. So that would be an adverse event. And then, if someone has like an anaphylactic reaction or something, I mean, that's obviously a serious adverse event. So what should happen is on the packaging or on the website, there should be very clearly stated either a phone number or an email address or a web address where the consumer can contact the company and say, hey, I had a bad reaction to your product. What do I do? So like on my website, for example, I have an adverse reaction event reporting portal. So it's like a form, that it's like in plain sight. So if someone has a reaction, they can click on that. They can fill in their name, address, all of their personal information so that I can get in touch with them to get more information, because it has to be reported to the FDA within 15 days.
Right.
And then, they give a description of what product it was, when it was purchased, how it was used, what the reaction was. And then there's also, a place where they can upload photos or medical documents or anything like that. So, I mean, that's just an easy way for customers to do it without having to call and go through the whole thing and then me email them forms, so they can just report it on their own. But there should at least be a phone number or an email address where someone takes it seriously and gets back to the customer and gathers the information. And depending on the information, if it's a minor adverse event, it is just kept on file. And if it is a major event or a serious one, then it is reported to the FDA.
So, and that would usually be the responsibility of the business to report.
Yes, correct.
Now, what if we were in a situation where a customer attempts to contact a business and they are not compliant or cooperative in that situation?
Yeah, then that's, first of all, a red flag that you should never purchase from them again.
I would say so, right.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you're trying to reach out to a business about a problem with their product, if they're blocking you on social media and not replying to your comments, then they know that they're liable, so if you can't report it to the manufacturer, then there's a website on the FDA website where the consumer can report it themselves to the FDA.
And that would be unfortunate if somebody were to have to take that channel on their own, because if somebody is ethical, then they would take ownership of that and do that for them and perhaps, compensate for that. And
Exactly.
Right. Well, that's unfortunate.
And things can happen. People can have reactions.
True.
100 people could use a product and be fine, and then one person may have a reaction to it. So, the main goal has to be the safety of your consumers. They're trusting you with their health, and spraying all over their body what they're buying from you. So, it does not look very good when the FDA contacts, the manufacturer and says, we had a report of an adverse event and the consumer was not able to resolve it with you. It's not a good look.
Not at all. Aroma Inquiry Lab says lavender isn't great when it gets in our eyes. A chemist told me that when I told her I didn't need goggles because I used essential oils. Yeah, I didn't use goggles. I was playing with fire when I was a newbie and messing around, and I wasn't doing these things, but then again, I never started a business and I never sold anything.
Right.
And I started to learn what would be necessary. And that's when I was like, I'm going to put this on the back burner because I need to return to this when I'm ready to do all of this preparing, because
Right.
I would never want to be in that situation where I was liable for, endangering anyone with the product that I create.
Right.
Tripler says, I believe we need compliment reporting protocol as well. You do, Chris. Love it. Love it. Does anybody else have any other questions in the chat? Just don't hesitate to ask. We actually have another comment here from Aroma Inquiry Lab. My point was that while I don't wear goggles when I had a chat with the actual working chemist at our uni, it was a real learning experience. Yes. I interpreted that as such. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. If anybody can give us a count of the amount of likes on this live stream, if one of our moderators can do that, just let us know how many likes that we have. And if you could please do that. And once again, just want to share this. Buy me a coffee.
JJ, another thing that people might want to look out for.
Yes.
Is another red flag is, when a business, and this does not go for hobbyist perfumers who are just blending at home.
Right, right.
I mean, you want to be as safe as you can, but when you're selling something to consumers, it needs to be safe. So if you're buying a perfume, when you buy a perfume, it needs to be made in a large batch because that batch has to be tested. And so we know that this batch of this perfume is safe. And we know that all of the bottles that go out will have the exact same amount of everything in it because it was made in a large batch.
Right, right.
And I'm not saying any names, but I know of some perfumers that make perfume by the bottle. So they will squirt the raw materials into the actual perfume bottle and then top it off with alcohol and send it. And so there's no way to be consistent.
No, not at all. You can't have
every bottle is a different batch. And then there are even perfumers who work that way, but then they will customize a fragrance for a client, maybe add a little bit more vanilla, or, I really like sandalwood. So just amp up the sandalwood note in that.
That's not how perfume works.
No. So there's no way to be accountable for the safety of a product if every bottle that goes out is a different batch that's untested.
Right. And if somebody were to do bespoke work, that comes with it a whole other set of guidelines, I would imagine, that would be specific to that person as well. But you can't just haphazardly decide that you're going to customize something that doesn't even, that's appalling. And like you said, first of all, it's a quality control thing. Mm-hmm. And then the inconsistency as well. I mean, what you're basically doing is you're saying that I'm willfully disregarding the mathematics of the whole practice. And also, how in the world are you making sure that you're following the correct dosing that meets the right? How does that even work? Right.
And if someone does have an adverse reaction, the whole point of having batch codes and batch testing is so you can say, oh, wow, we had 2 customers report a problem with this perfume and it was the same batch code. Mm-hmm. We need to do a recall, So like none of that accountability or follow through can happen if everybody has a different batch that was just made on the fly and, not tested and not recorded and not followed up on in any way. So yeah, I don't understand.
I mean, we can talk about how people might eat in their workplace and might have their dog or cat wandering in their workplace. And we can talk about how they may be barefoot or you name it. But to me, what is really beyond the pale is that kind of cynicism to think that you are providing a quality product by compounding per bottle. That shows absolutely no command, no discipline, and it's an insult to perfume making. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
So I would say that anybody, if you find out that they do that, that's not how it should be done. Don't wear their perfume. Don't support their business.
Yeah, and be very leery of anyone that says, "Oh, well, I weighed everything out," and because JJ, you have studied perfume making. If you have a material in a formula that is in there at 0.002%, and if you're making a kilo batch,
right,
then that's okay. If something that's small, that is readable on your scale. Right. But if you're doing it in 100 ml bottle, you're just really kind of guessing, because as the volume goes down, as the quantity goes down, then you lose accuracy, even if you're using a good scale.
I just don't even see how it's possible, unless that person, and it all ties back to what exactly is it that a perfumer who is doing that per bottle, what exactly does their formula comprise of? Because if it's that easy to just compound it per bottle, are they just dosing X amount of this fragrance oil and that fragrance oil and this base in order to achieve that? Which is, it's appalling in itself, but you can't have a complex formula and do that. And you can't, or nor should you, advertise it as haute perfumery if you're doing that.
That's just the point. Yeah. I look at some of my vintage inspired Chypre formulas, and they're like 100 lines long. How could you, just even time wise, how could you sit there and make each bottle individually with 100 different materials?
You can't. That means they're doing some janky shit. Just to be blunt,
that's the technical term.
That's some funky stuff. If I knew that somebody was doing that, I'd say no thanks. So if you see any of these, not to be insulting, upstart perfumers who have decided that is their way of compounding, as if that even makes sense, don't just steer clear.
No.
It really concerns me. There's so much talk right now about content creators being unethical and deceptive and stuff. And I think that's all hot garbage. You know what? What else is new? The sun comes up in the daytime. The sky is blue. What concerns me more is that we have, and this is a sad thing because we don't want tyranny, so that we don't have the opportunity to be independent perfumers. But if we continue to curry favor to these perfumers who are not doing what they should be doing, it doesn't bode well for those who do follow the correct practices. And we should condemn it and not give it attention. And what is it that we could do as consumers to bring light to it without slandering? You know what I mean? We don't want to outright say this person's doing this, even though many people probably know. What do we do?
Let me ask you this, to play devil's advocate. Why not? In every other industry, if there's bacteria in your bag of salad, it's recalled, it's on the news. It's consumer protection, it's consumer safety. Why are we walking on eggshells not to upset anyone's feelings when it's not malicious, it's a fact,
I think you make a good point. And is there anybody in the chat, anybody who's tuned in, who has any concerns about any brands have had poor experiences like this? We're not here to destroy character, and we're not here to terminate businesses. But does anybody have any anecdotes of small indie perfumers who have not met your expectations and you've had issues like this, I mean, we're open to discuss them. So Aroma Inquiry Lab, not to mention so-called fragrance bars that are popping up all over, including here in Toronto, that is most definitely using fragrance oils. Those are hot garbage as well. Like I don't recommend them. People have asked me about it. I'm actually I'm ashamed of the perfumers who stand behind them as well and collaborate with them, because I not a fan.
Yeah.
Okay, well there we go. So I guess this viewer is mentioning one of them, but it's important. I think that the one thing that we can walk away from it is maybe to just pay closer attention to what they're saying and what they're doing, and let that speak for itself, and think twice as to whether or not that's going to be a quality product. And no price is really a parameter. You know, you're not. If somebody is selling something for $300, how are they deciding that it's worth that? You know, when there's not that, when some things, and the thing that's funny is when I've seen some of this stuff before, when there's a certain transparency that's almost mortifying, but then there's also things that are opaque as well,
Yeah.
things that are not being said, and then things that are not being exposed as well.
And JJ, from the business side of things, so we've been talking from the consumer point of view, but from the perfumer's side of things, or the business owner's perspective, you know, making sure that you have safe products is not only safeguarding your customers, it's safeguarding you. It's safeguarding your business, because there will be a less chance of an adverse event. And if there is one, then you have all of your ducks in a row, you've done your due diligence, you've followed industry best practices. Like my product liability insurance, they requested, you know, what steps are you following for safety? What reporting system do you have in place to take care of customer complaints or reactions and things like that? So, you know, you're protecting yourself as a business too, by going about things the right way, and instead of shirking, shirking your responsibilities for safety. And with this MOCRA legislation, it's the law now. You know, it's not a matter of, do you want to be compliant? If you're selling it in your business, you have to be compliant. And if you're not, then, you know, you're liable. And I don't want to scare, you know, indie perfumers that are, you know, hearing this, because it's really not, I mean, it sounds like it's a lot, but when you really step back and look at the regulations, you know, there is an exemption for small businesses. There's a small business exemption. So I believe that it is, if your net, if your accumulative gross sales for the past 3 years are less than $1 million, then you're exempt from GMP implementation. You're exempt from registering your facility with the FDA, and you are exempt from, there's a third one, listing your products in the FDA database. So, I mean, they are trying to make it so that they're not putting up a barrier, you know, for small businesses, or that consumer who is starting out in their spare bedroom and is trying to do things the right way. You know, they don't want to make it so that you're not just blocked from entering the industry at all. But there are some things that you still have to do. You still have to do the adverse event reporting. You still have to do testing, and you still have to follow the labeling guidelines for alcohol, which is really, I feel like that's just a basic good business, you know?
Indeed. So, angstrom. I like to. I always wondered how Rogue is able to not abide by IFRA. So Manuel Cross, I heard, actually did do GC testing, and it just so happened that everything that he did ended up being IFRA compliant, even though he wasn't willfully following it, which just happened to be, I guess, a happy accident in his part. He didn't have to. That's what I heard. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I heard that somewhere too.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as he is able to not abide by IFRA because we're not in the EU, as far as, but with what you were mentioning earlier with a MOCR, MOCR, that could change.
Mm-hmm.
That could change for us here.
It has changed. Yeah.
It has. That is going to change. It's just the FDA is going to take some time to implement it, and
it's rolling out. Yeah.
Rolling out. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Esteban Fernandez, no bad experiences yet, but I try to always sample everything and not blind buy fragrances. Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb. I think blind buying probably, you know, you could throw caution to the wind and blind buy if you're fairly certain that, you know, you're willing to take the risk. I wouldn't necessarily blind buy indie perfumes just because, like, I would want to develop a relationship and kind of sample for sure and make sure that they're, you know, trustworthy. But even for commercial fragrances, you know, you could have a reaction. So yeah, I don't frown on blind buying, but I don't necessarily encourage it either, because, you know, there's so many risks beyond, you know, you're having a reaction to it. You could just decide that you don't like it, and then it's a pain in the neck to return it. So, or, you know, in some cases you can't. So yeah. So Rachel just mentioned that there were 31 likes as of 7:08. If we get another like count, let's try to aim for 40 likes by the end of this stream. We're going to be running a little bit longer here. I've been debating for this third season whether to do 2 hours or to do an hour and a half, just so that we're not running out of steam. Hey, maybe this is a good opportunity to hear from our viewers to see, like, do you think that a 1 hour and 30 stream would be better for the season, or a 2 hour stream? It doesn't need to be set in stone. I'd love to hear your feedback. If I could create a poll in real time, I would do that, but I don't want to be too distracted. So we have Paradigm Sniff here mentioning that we have 35. We have 5 more to go to ensure that we have 40 likes by the end of this stream. We have Esteban Fernandez. It's good to know that we can and should ask indie houses for safety info and look at their website, make sure they are legit and following guidelines. The website, he's absolutely right. Sometimes you can just make a determination, make a conclusion by looking at what they share and what they don't share on their website, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And Rachel says, can Darren and JJ mention any indie houses they recommend that are very good about this stuff, who are responsible? I'll have you make some recommendations that you feel come with your good housekeeping seal of approval. Recommend some or give some shout outs. It's fine.
Yeah. I know that Michael Schrammel from For the Scent of It is, you know, he follows GMP. You know, he has a very safe work environment, and we chat often, so I know these things. And you know, he does test his fragrances. He sends them out for GC testing. So I know that he is really compliant. And I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of good indie perfumers out there. I don't want to, like, scare anyone away from, you know, from trying indie perfumes. It's just when you're a small business, I can see how this overhead, you know, could be daunting. But then you just have to maybe pull back and, you know, not launch, you know, a new fragrance every other week or something, you know? I mean, like, when I launch fragrances, I launch like maybe 2 or 3 a year because of the process that is involved and the testing and getting the compliance certificates and everything like that. It takes time. So, you know, but it's doable. And I don't want to scare off any indie perfumers or people that are thinking going into this, because I know it does sound like a lot, but if you just have a plan and you follow it and just go step by step, it's doable, you know?
Yeah,
What about,
yeah.
do you have anyone you recommend?
Well, there's my good friend John Beeble. I've
Ah,
known him for years. He does January Scent Project,
yeah.
and he's very dedicated to all of the things that we've discussed. Marie-Pierre Blanchette of Miscale. She has a transparency about her work and her business as well. Anjali, I think Anjali, we would want to give a shout out to as well. I think these are great indie perfumers out there. Let me think of some others. I just shared a review of Ellen Covey, Olympic Orchids. That's another one. So there's a number of them out there, and I think that if you just use your savvy, you just pay close attention to what's going on. Especially, this is the thing, the emperor's new clothes can often be the social media aspect.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know, it often gives it away. So, just pay attention to that, and also just how they're advertising. And I appreciate that you had mentioned the output as well, because there's something to be said about a paced output. And it's not that necessarily a perfumer is not capable of having several releases in a short time span, but I would also look at whether it's proportionate to the amount of experience they may have.
Mm.
And if that person is relatively inexperienced, and I would, how long have they been on the scene? We have somebody like Pierre Guillaume, who is indie, but also a very large brand. And he's really prolific, but
Mhm.
he's also been he's been perfume making for 25 years or more.
Right.
But if you have somebody who's relatively new to it and is just cranking out one release after another, you got to wonder how much quality control is going on with that, and how much work and attention and attentiveness has been put into each of those. Have they done? Here's something that you can help me out with, Darren. What about as the role of a perfumer to sort of test the field a little bit? To see, do you think that some of these perfumers are not really, I mean, you can't really do focus groups in the same way larger businesses do, but what could be said about that? Like making sure before you release something that you know that it's a quality release.
Yeah. Well, that's a hard one. Because I'm going to be honest with you, like I don't do focus groups or even like having my friends and family test fragrances and give me feedback. Maybe that's a mistake on my part. I create things that I have a passion to create or that I would like to wear. And it's going to sound kind of weird, but the customers who match up with that aesthetic find me. So, but my style is not a mass appealing
Yeah.
style either. So it is sort of a, a niche among niche, with like the vintage feel. So I'm probably not the right person to ask about that because I don't do focus groups or.
Yeah.
You know,
I definitely don't think it's required. I think it depends on the perfumer. I think if a perfumer maybe wants to make sure that they're at the level where they're ready for prime time, maybe it's a good
well,
idea.
that's true. Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean I've been doing this for a while, so
Right.
in the beginning, yes. I mean I
Yeah.
did. I gave away free more perfume than I sold.
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
to get feedback. So yeah, I guess that I did do it at one point, but I'm not so much anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think in your case, I don't necessarily, I don't think that it's necessary for you. But I see with people who have a little bit less experience, maybe getting that feedback, constructive feedback, it would be critical to their
Yeah.
development, and maybe receiving that feedback and being open to it by their peers, other
Mhm.
indie perfumers, or those who are more experienced. And And even going, beyond the scope of friends, because friends may just want to tell you what you want to hear, but getting that constructive feedback can really light a fire under you and push you to improve and to get better and to tighten things up. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I am lucky that I have close relationships with some other indie perfumers, and we'll swap samples of things and say, give me your feedback on this. I like this, but I feel like there's something just not quite sitting right. And, it is good to get outside perspectives.
Right. I agree. So now is the time that I am going to discuss this beautiful sample that you sent me, Trailing Arbutus. And you sent this to me because I told you that I live in the state of Massachusetts, and our state flower is the Mayflower, which is another name for Trailing Arbutus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you paid attention in school and you know about the Mayflower that landed on Plymouth Rock, it was named after
right.
all of the Trailing Arbutus that was growing. Oh, you have great top notes. Let me tell you, you really know how to put together these top notes, and that's not an easy feat.
Do you know the story behind this fragrance?
I have to say I'm absolutely ignorant to everything about this fragrance except for the fact that it's Trailing Arbutus. I'm coming into it completely without any context.
So I did not create this original fragrance.
Ooh, tell us more.
Yeah, this is a historic recreation.
Ooh.
Well, my version of it.
Yeah.
So this was a fragrance that was released in the year 1900.
Mm-hmm.
And it was perfumed by a German chemist who was a self-taught perfumer. And his name was Adolf Getting. And he had his own perfume company in New York. And the owner of the California Perfume Company, which was then years later purchased ultimately by Avon, sort of headhunted him and bought out his company. And then he was the head perfumer for the California Perfume Company. So Trailing Arbutus is one that he perfumed. And I was working with the Scented Devil, Varanus Rodari, Derek, and he came across the original formula in archives, and it's public domain. And so we were like, well, I wonder what it would be like if we made this. Like, I want to smell this. It's like from the year 1900. Yeah. And so some of the ingredients are not usable today, like the lily of the valley note that is in this. In the formula is a wash of real lily of the valley, and as you know, all parts of that plant are toxic.
Right. Wow.
So I used other, muguet and lily of the valley materials for that. And the top note that you're referring to is rosewood.
Yeah.
So
it shimmers. I love that shimmering kind of quality to rosewood with its high linalool content. But the thing is that people say, and I know there's some issues with rosewood as a tree and as a protected species, and it's we could go off on a tangent about that. But people say, well, just replace it with linalool. But there's these trace compounds in rosewood that even though they're just trace, they just are they're what give rosewood that shimmering quality that it's like it feels like rosiness without being rosy, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it does have that. It has almost like a more balsamic element to it than just plain linalool. But this is this is a plantation rosewood. So
good. Well, I figured you would find a sustainable option, because we want to support the sustainable farmers and producers because they do exist out there, you know.
They do, yeah. So in South America, there are several that, they plant them, and so they're cultivated. So it's not, it's not impactful
Right.
environment. And then the musk in this, in the original formula, it was, a tincture of musk pod, which
Oh God! Wow.
is illegal.
Yes.
So yeah, so this is an accord that I created to approximate natural deer musk.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a synthetic accord.
Very lovely.
Yeah, I was just so excited to do this, to see what this smelled like.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, and it isn't too similar, but just um, just the sensibility of it reminds me of something from Worth, like à la nuit from Worth Paris, or Je reviens, like vintage Je reviens, or à la nuit.
Yeah, it
Which
has
makes sense. Early 20th century.
very early, yeah, and it has this delicate nature to it. It's not heavy. It's before, like the Mousse de Saxe, type notes started being used. So
You know what I was saying? I'm sorry, Darren. I sorry to interrupt. Danse la nuit, not à la nuit. Danse la nuit by not à la nuit. I think that's a Serge Lutens. Danse la nuit by Worth Paris.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no,
I just
no.
realized I made the mistake.
And what I find amazing about this, and I put the on my website, I put a link to the original formula, and there's only, I'm looking right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's only 7 materials.
Oh wow!
In this, yet it's so complex.
It is. It is. So I'm going to your site right now. Yeah, I do pick up the benzaldehyde. There is that sort of that bitter almond quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And yeah, this does remind me of Hawthorne too. And I'm a fan of Hawthorne. I think I shared like a whole week of reviews with fragrances that prominently feature Hawthorne blossom, which to me is one of those supporting notes that almost never gets discussed by fume heads.
No.
Never gets discussed. I think they're just like, well, whatever that is, it must smell nice. but there are these Hawthorne tree species that just are magical. I've explained this before. When you smell them in early May, that's when they're in bloom. The ether of them is spectacular, but it's not they're not the kind of blossoms that you bury your nose in, because the closer you get to them, the more intense they are. And yeah. But I love when there's a Hawthorne accord in a perfume. It just gives you that, just sort of the je ne sais quoi.
Mm-hmm. And it's not used very much in modern perfumery.
No.
It have a sort of dated vibe to it, but
yeah.
That's about it.
On occasion, you'll find some perfumers. I mean, Hawthorne accord is wonderful in Quai d'Ange. The Hermescence Quai d'Ange has a Hawthorne accord. But we're talking about an Hermescence. It's not a mainstream.
Okay.
And then Anatole Breton, L'Eau de Mézin has a very prominent Hawthorne accord as well. So there's a few of them out there that have that feature Hawthorne.
Yeah, I love Hawthorne. I mean, I don't have any type of like absolute or anything from it. It's just it's a base that I made from some vintage formulas that I studied.
Yeah. It's a ton of anisaldehyde. Anisaldehyde really makes the bulk of it. Yeah.
It's lovely though.
Wow. And this musk accord, really something. Yeah, this is really beautiful. I mean, of course, this is in my wheelhouse. I love vintage style, and there are few perfumers out there, indie or otherwise, who are resurrecting these in such a in such an honest manner as you do, and it's really appreciated. I mean, Songe à Fleur, I thought was absolutely beautiful as well. And then folks have been discussing Dorian's Fougere and talk about just an absolute knockout. I really rank it up there with the original Fougere Royale. Just really well done. Really,
yeah, that's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, yeah. So we're currently at 37. We have 3 more to go, so that we, or not 3, yeah, 8, 9, yeah, 3 more to go before we reach 40 at the end of this stream. And people are talking about where they can purchase your perfumes. Fragrance Vault ships internationally. Yes. That's wonderful that folks abroad can now purchase your work.
Yeah,
beautiful. Exciting. Rachel says that you are one of her favorite perfumers of all time.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. I love you.
So does anybody else have any questions in the chat or any commentary? We have another comment from Angstrom. Would love to hear about what fragrances Darren wears aside from his beautiful creations, of course. Tell us like what some existing fragrances that are near and dear to you.
Yeah, well, I love vintage fragrances.
So you don't say.
I know, yeah, big surprise. So a lot of what I wear is vintage. A lot of what I wear, like today, you know, I'm testing things. So I'm just skin testing something that I'm working on for my October fragrance of the month. But I love florals. I just bought my first full-size bottle of Salome.
Ah, oh, nice. Now that's another perfumer that we should add to that list. Indie perfumer, an indie perfumer that you can trust. I would love to try the new one, Epona. Epona has been.
I got a sample of it. Yes, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. The orris in it is just like to die for. It's beautiful. So beautifully blended and balanced. It's gorgeous. That's another one that I would probably end up getting a full bottle.
Yeah.
Sample right now.
I need to get a sample of it because it just sounds like it's calling my name. What are some what are some early 20th to mid 20th century vintages that put a pep in your step? And
well, I mean, some of my favorites, Crêpe de Chine.
Yeah, we bonded over Crêpe de Chine.
Yes, we did. We were probably bidding on the same bottle on eBay. I love Shocking. Schiaparelli. This is later, but I just got a really nicely preserved bottle of Wood Yew.
Ah, Fabergé Wood Yew.
That's Fabergé. Yeah, and my grandmother always used to wear that, so that's a nice olfactory memory.
Very nice.
I love I don't know, Paloma Picasso. I wear a lot.
That's a good one. That's a heavy hitter. Love it.
Yeah. I've been on a Rive Gauche kick too.
Ah, you remember it was a few weeks ago. I was doing a whole week of aldehydic fragrances. I did a review of Rive Gauche.
Yeah.
And I have an old canister, and let me tell you, those canisters, they keep them fresh. There are very few fragrances that were sold in canisters, but I have one from the 70s, and it says cologne on it, cologne spray.
Okay. And is this the female or male version?
It's the female version.
Okay, yeah, that's what I've been.
Yeah, female version and cologne spray. It's pretty much the same concentration as an eau de toilette, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It lasts forever.
Yeah, and it's sort of just like that. I love the trail. It's all about the sillage with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and the sprayer on that, like just one little spray, it's like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Did I tell you when I first sprayed it? because it's in a pressurized atomizer. So I killed a little bit of the ozone layer every time I spray it, unfortunately. And I depress the sprayer and it just doesn't want to go back up. And I have to yank it back up or else it's just going to completely dispense.
Yeah.
So every time it's almost like ritualistic when I actually do apply it. I make sure, to just hit it very lightly and then push it up and hit it very lightly. And so I don't deplete it and the ozone layer at the same time, but gorgeous stuff. We have a question here. Actually, Rachel is celebrating Paloma Picasso as well. Roma Inquiry Lab, Aramis. Aramis.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate Aramis. Aramis was in the zeitgeist of my youth, so I have a lot of memories of smelling that growing up. Both that and its cousin Aromatics Elixir, both composed by Bernard Champ.
Yes.
Lovely one. We have another, yes, Bernard Champ for the win, indeed. Pano's favorite Tom Ford of all time. I reminded myself of that Aretha Franklin interview that she did a few years before she passed, and she did this. And she was asked about Nicki Minaj, and she says, "I think I'm going to pass on that one."
Yeah.
Tom Ford. I only have 2 Tom Fords, and they were absolute commercial failures, but I thought they were really great. Fougère de Jean and Vie de Bois.
Okay.
I wasn't too crazy about the private collection enough to add bottles to my repertoire, or whatever you want to call it. So do you like any Tom Ford? Or
I don't have much Tom Ford. I have a decant of oud wood that I purchased, and I don't really care for. But I'm not one for like the super amber materials.
You're talking not so much like an amber accord, quote unquote Oriental style amber accord. You're talking more the amber woods, like the heavy
the northern
Tom Fords often have them too. Honestly.
Right. And I mean, it's a mass appeal. People like it. It's mass appealing, so it's fine. Yeah. It's not something I would want to wear all day. And I have Vert d'Encens.
Vert d'Encens, and Rachel has Vert d'Encens.
Yeah, which I do like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that line, the Vert, the 2, was it just 2 Verts? Oh, there was a Vert Bohème. I think there were 3 of them: Vert Bohème, Vert d'Encens, Vert de Bois. And then there were 3 of those, and then there were 2 of the Fougère d'Argent and Fougère. I don't remember what the other one was, but they were not big sellers, and they were discontinued after only years. But they happened to be standouts to me because they didn't really. They kind of they weren't really characteristic of the private blends. There were a few others that I appreciated. Oh, you know what I loved years ago, actually? I don't want to poo-poo all of them, but I loved Noir de Noir. That was like a signature for me back in 2008, 2009. I loved that one. That was the first one that I bought. And Plume Japonais, Jonquille de Nuit. I thought that was very nice as well. I mean, I didn't get full bottles of a lot of them, but then some of them are absolute stonkers, though. I thought they were awful. Like, I thought a lot of their citrus ones were just so crass and like some citruses are just not meant to be toyed with so that they last longer, because when they dry down with these these fixatives, they what's the word I'm looking for, like they nag at you,
it's like a cloying,
right?
And
I smell a lot of that too. Who also it does that, and it pisses me off, is Francois Kirkchin. Oh, the fixative use. Oh God. I just can't do the heavy dosages of ambroxan in those situations. And I'm not anti-ambroxan. Ambroxan could be really useful and really can create some beautiful effects, but the overusage of it is just hideous.
No, I agree, and it's getting a bad rap because
It's getting a bad rap because of the overuse.
used, and it's a gorgeous material. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that some of the more beautiful aspects of ambroxan are experienced at lower dosages.
Right.
Right.
No, because it really gets to demonstrate what it can do in the composition, because I think it's meant to be dosed. It was originally meant to be dosed in tiny quantities to blend an ambergris effect, and ambergris was never really highly dosed to begin with. I mean, it was considered a rare and valuable perfume ingredient. So the idea of taking something that's supposed to approximate the effect of it and then overdosing it, you end up creating this whole other kind of like globular blob, noisy kind of effect that I just don't find really pleasant. And I find it a lot. I like in Parfums de Marly too, like really oppressive.
Yeah.
Aroma. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Darren.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, if it's used in excess, what I experience is that it begins to distort the other materials in the composition.
No, that's true. They swallow. That's another thing too. There's been a rumor. I have some friends who work kind of like adjacent to the business at large, and I guess a lot of these newer perfumers are riding on algorithms like pretty much every other art expression now, which is kind of depressing in some ways. And what they're doing is they're actually characterizing their perfumes based on the expectations of what a perfume should be. It's sort of like now it's a call and response, like, oh, you want this? We're going to give it to you. And they compose these things because they know that the consumers love to talk about things being extra clean and extra, perform, like longevity and all that sort of stuff. And I think that these younger perfumers are actually putting things onto the market to give them what they expect. And as a result, it's throwing away a lot of the beauty and nuance of perfumery because they're putting that ahead of everything else. And they're not even getting well enough acquainted with natural materials and some of the more subtle synthetics. And if they even use them, and I think in some cases they end up using them, and then they even advertise that they're using them in these releases, like, these LMR naturals. But then when you smell it, like, where are they? What did you do to them? Because they ended up overdosing them with these really strong, high impact woody ambers. Yeah. And it just seems like it's a waste. Like to swallow all of that, it's not just me. Like, do you know?
It's not just you. And I mean, that sounds like some type of method of like reactionary perfumery.
Right.
Like from a creative standpoint.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to pay attention to what TikTok talks about, and we're going to release products for TikTok. Like, people fucking release everything for TikTok now. Movies, books, everything for the TikTok audience. Now we're having TikTok perfume.
Yeah.
Aroma Inquiry Lab. I've left this comment up here for a while, but I thought it was very kind. This is the most positive and encouraging convo about compliance and fragrance I've seen online. Thanks, you two, for leading the way. You're modeling good practice for others. Well, thank you for tuning in. And I hope you can come back, because we'll have discussions similar to this every 2 weeks. So thank you so much for tuning in. But yeah, I mean, I guess we could both go in our soapbox and bitch and complain, and people like that to a degree. But maybe we should wrap this up. Maybe end it on a good note. What are some things that you find are promising right now in perfume, instead of looking at the negative? What do you think are some good things?
I mean, there's a lot of good things. I got an email from my rep at Robertet, and they have just launched a new line of sustainable upcycled materials. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
They have some beautiful sounding materials that I want to explore. And, you know, I mean, there is some weirdness going on with like TikTok and perfumery and things like that. But I mean, for the most part, this is the most welcoming and most encouraging community, you know, this fragcom community, you know. It's amazing. And I've met so many wonderful people. And, you know, as a perfumer and a small indie perfumer, it's just been so encouraging. So yes, I mean, you're always going to have the outliers, but I just kind of ignore them and just do my thing. So.
And that's true in so many respects. You're going to have outliers in the fragrance community, whether they're, you know, not so reliable or trustworthy perfumers, or, you know, content creators who want to focus on things that maybe are not, you know, adding value to the discussion. And rather than focus attention to that, just escort your attention elsewhere to where there are good conversations, and people are sharing ideas and celebrating things, and to be informative as well. I know some of this, you know, this stream was, you know, not necessarily as lighthearted, but I think it is important to talk about this sort of stuff, especially when it comes up in our fragrance community, and to help people out, and to just beware of those who may not be acting in good faith. Because I think if people are doing that, you know, either they're, I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, the only thing I can imagine is that people don't act on good faith, because if you were acting on good faith, then maybe you would work a little bit harder to make sure that you're delivering a product to the consumer that's safe, that's good quality, you know,
worth the money you're charging
worth the money that you're charging. Like, if you're going to try to charge the same kind of money as a Chanel exclusive, you better really know what you're doing.
Yeah, there needs to be a reason why.
And this is the thing, like, a lot of indie perfumers who are doing the quality of their work isn't, you know, it isn't too far away from the, you know, the work that is supervised by Jacques Polge at Chanel, and they're not charging nearly as much as that. So that's something to think about, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I just want to get back to the comments here. We have lots of love here. Rachel, thank you. I'm going to start playing the outro music here. Hi. I just wish it would happen on its own. It would be on a timer. So in 2 weeks, as far as right now, we're going to have Fliss Sniffs stuff on Instagram, and Liz Odorance. She's a good friend of me and the channel. And for that one, we're going to talk about another important topic, which is the purpose of reviewing. You know, there's been a lot of discussion on whether a review should have some substance to support it, or if it's good enough to just be blunt. And, you know, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. So we're going to talk about that, and talk about the process of reviewing, and whether or not reviewing is useful, or, you know, what reviews are, you know, baseless. Because there's a lot of them out there. I mean, I'm sure you've read them, Darren. Like, you read on base notes, right? Or Fragrantica, and, you know, it'll just be two lines, and it'll just be, you know, it won't say anything about the experience. Just like, I don't like this. It smelled like hot garbage. You know, like, okay, is that really a review? I guess.
Yeah, or the review that is just like the note listing.
Right. What is up?
I could look that up myself, you know.
Why did you add that? Are you trying to bulk it a bit to make it look more like a review? Like, that's kind of silly, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, stick around. Let's talk backstage. Everybody, it's been wonderful having you tuned in. Tune in again in 2 weeks. We'll be back for Effluvium. And until then, everybody be well, smell fantastic, and take care. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.